I'll tell you, the aroma is killing me because I'm ready to dig in.
This is the best smell in the world. Butters and onion. All right. Good morning, Nonni.
Good morning, Ashley, my dear granddaughter.
Now, for many of you, you already know who this is. Many of the viewers who have been watching this channel from the beginning, you know that this is Nonni. But for those of you who are tuning in maybe for the first time or don't know Nonni from some previous episodes, can you introduce yourself to our new friends?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be talking to you. And of course, the most important thing is that I'm here visiting with my granddaughter and having a conversation with her about all sorts of things.
Yes. They probably want to know your name, though.
Oh, my name's Luella Kenny, maiden name Pachetti, and that's, and I'm old. You're going to edit that out?
No, we're keeping that in there. That's great. Would you like to tell them how old you are?
Is it working?
Yeah, it's working.
Well, yes, I'm 87 years old, but I think I'm a pretty good 87 years old because I still keep very active. And I have to teach my grandchildren how to cook, and they want all of my old recipes. And in fact, you know, it's very interesting because we're taping this before Thanksgiving, and 60 years ago, the first year I was married, and I attempted, when I couldn't cook, I attempted to do Thanksgiving dinner for the whole family. Boy, I really had some guts there. But anyway, I decided I wanted something that would be my tradition. And that tradition was the introduction of French onion soup for Thanksgiving dinner. And I'm happy to say that 60 years later, my granddaughter is still doing French onion soup for Thanksgiving dinner and keeping that kind of crazy tradition that I started, keep it going, which makes me very happy.
Yeah. And actually maybe we can show them a little bit later the recipe and how to make that. But now you said it was the first time you had done a Thanksgiving dinner before and you wanted to start this new tradition. How many people do you remember? Did you have a large gathering for that?
I had, one thing that was very, very nice for me is that my father was actually at that dinner, and by Christmas he was in the hospital, and we never had another holiday together. And so that was very important to me. So my parents, my sister and her husband, my in-laws and a sister-in-law, and my husband and myself were at that dinner. It was in our small apartment. We had an extra room where I set up a table, and it actually turned out quite well. I did do a practice Thanksgiving dinner about a week or so before with a tiny little turkey and I surprised myself.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you this, that my aunt, I was never very domestic. And I had, in my head, I just wanted to go to school and that's all I wanted to do. And so when I got engaged, my parents had gone to Florida, and I decided I was going to try and cook a dinner for my fiance. And my aunt calls me on the phone and she says, I'll cook dinner. She says, he'll never marry you if he tastes your cooking. Well, he did marry me. Obviously, look at all of the results of that marriage.
Now, you said he did end up marrying you, but how did that dinner turn out? Was it good? Was it a disaster?
Good. No, the dinner turned out very well. I made shepherd's pie, and I made some kind of a easy Jell-O graham cracker dessert on that. So he really enjoyed it, and actually, I mean, to this day, well, now my grandchildren are taking over, but up until just a couple of years ago, I would do all of the holidays and cook all of the holidays and have 25 people for dinner on Christmas Eve and all that sort of stuff. But now the younger generation has taken over, and I'm very happy to see that, because I hear so often that which I disagree with completely. They haven't done it. So many people complain the younger generation isn't doing it, but in my case, I mean, uh, the younger generation is doing it. Even during COVID, I have another son on Long Island, and we had a Polish tradition. My husband was Polish, to do a special Christmas Eve dinner, and that dinner, and we did it for years. And so during COVID, when my son from Long Island couldn't come up to Buffalo, where I lived outside of Buffalo, we he actually found a Polish store in Long Island, and he bought everything that he needed, and was very it was very important to him. He said, "I don't want to lose that tradition." And I guess I can tell a funny story here. My husband was sick quite often, and this is not Christmas or that, but this is talking about Easter.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband was in an intensive care unit in the hospital. Well, I wasn't thinking about anything, and there was also a special meal for Easter Sunday, and taking the basket, which Ashley still does, taking the basket to church on Saturday night of everything you're going to eat on Sunday morning. So anyway, he became very agitated, and he kept screaming at me that I had to get down. There's a place in Buffalo called Broadway Market, and it's very famous for all of its Polish food. And so you get down to Broadway Market, and our kids are not losing this tradition. You got to get down there. So, not wishing to agitate him since he was very sick, I went down to Broadway Market. Meanwhile, the priest from our parish came, and he said, "Where's Luella?" He said, "Oh, she's shopping." I said, "Did you tell him why I was shopping?" "No." Well, I felt about that bad, really, really, because what wife is a husband in intensive care and she's out shopping? But anyway, that was the way it goes. But that's how important traditions are to us, and how happy I am to see them being still carried out, even 2 generations later.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said it was a Polish tradition for Christmas Eve, and you are Italian, right?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Mm-hmm. And can you speak a little bit on blending, like for our Christmas Eve dinner, how you were able to blend those cultures and those traditions and carry that on?
Oh, well, yeah, I never let go by that we didn't have well, of course, the Italians also, it was the Feast of Seven Fishes, so we were eating fish and that, but I always had, well, Italian Christmas cookies are unbelievable. and Ashley will tell you, I baked for her wedding, and
maybe we can find some pictures to put up here for that.
Yeah,
and show
well,
off.
there are pictures, yes, but anyway, I think I did a good job.
I think you did okay. Yeah.
Just okay, huh?
Yeah, we'll find some pictures for him.
So anyway, this is so I would always, when I take the basket to church on Easter, there's an Italian tradition of a special bread. It's called pupa con uova. That's an Italian, and it means dal with eggs, and you make the bread, and then you have eggs inside, and it's like a nest, and it's all decorated. We have a picture of that too that you can show, but I always make sure that I have that in the basket too, and always the Italian tradition was maintained. My husband and my sons, they used to like to tease me. I had a kitchen upstairs and a kitchen in the basement, and I don't know how we had these plaques from something that said Italian kitchen, Polish kitchen. So the Polish kitchen went upstairs, and the Italian kitchen was upstairs, and the Polish kitchen was downstairs. But they would harass me. I mean, my husband and sons, everyone, even these grandchildren love to harass me constantly. And so they would take my Italian kitchen and they put it upside down at the bottom of the refrigerator or stick it someplace else. I mean, they were always having fun trying to tease me with something or another. But I think I'm a pretty easygoing. I mean, it's their fun. Let them have fun. I mean, the other thing was I was 3 months older than my husband, and he loved those 3 months. I mean, hey, why spoil his fun? I mean, after all, one time he was in the hospital, and it was on my birthday, and I go in there, and he had told all the nurses in the hospital that I was older than he was now. So, but
cradle robber.
I know.
Or a cougar.
I
like cougar
yeah.
better.
Anyway, but he was having so much fun, so let's not let him have his fun.
Now, what on that Christmas Eve dinner? What part of that was the Polish tradition?
Well, Christmas Eve dinner was first of all, there was a wafer called an opłatek, and before we start eating, I mean, the wafer is shared with everyone and giving best wishes for the coming year. Usually, the head of the family goes around and sees everyone, and then it's broken between everyone at the table, and then we started with. Well, this is an interesting thing because my husband and I, this Italian singing in Polish, but I did reading it phonetically, and when I would read it phonetically, and that was fine, but and I did all the Polish cooking. Okay, so for an Italian, I think that's pretty good, and then and anyway, everyone seemed to have a different soup from different regions of Poland. So I'm sure that if anyone is out there and is familiar with the Polish tradition, I know many have mushroom soup, or some of them have a beet borscht with the ushka, but wherever my mother-in-law's family, I'm told it was around Kielce, which is a little bit south of Warsaw. That was where her family came from. Yes, I've been to Poland a few times, by the way, and anyway. They made a soup, and they called it kapusta, and kapusta means sauerkraut, cabbage, whatever in Polish. And so it was a soup that was made with yellow split peas, dried mushrooms, and it was in sauerkraut and that, and so it was very good. And in fact, somebody just brought me some dried mushrooms from Poland. A friend of mine from Poland brought them, and I decided I had to do something special, so I thought that I would make a pot of the soup and share it with the members of the family that liked it. Some of them, it was a different soup, and not everyone liked it. But then we had all kinds of fish, different fishes, and that we had all kinds of pierogi, and of course parsley. I take that back, not parsley, but potatoes, mashed potatoes with some fried onions mixed in with them, and then we had a fruit compote also was part of it, and finally it sort of got to be too much, and then I had some kasha, which is barley made up with prunes. But those were all part of the tradition. And then of course we had so many desserts and things. Did I miss something on there? I'm trying to think.
I don't know.
I can't think. And I always had to get my Italian part in too, because St. Joseph's Day is a big day, and there's a special dinner in Italy, in Sicily especially, where my maternal side of the family came from. My father was actually born in Tuscany. And so, but they were very poor. They had a famine, and the people were praying to Saint Joseph that if he helped them out, they would do this meal every year and then help give whatever proceeds to help the poor. And so the tradition has carried on, and many of the churches have done it. It too is a meatless meal, but it has all of these vegetables, has a special split pea with rice soup and all of these fried vegetables and fish, mainly codfish is done. But it's a huge meal with many courses. And I used to do that, and every year, just in the family, on a smaller version than going out.
Yeah.
And the one year I prepared this whole St. Joseph's table, and the mothers were there, my mother and my husband's mother, and my husband kept coming to me. He says he wasn't feeling well, but we can't do it again, lose the tradition. You have to finish this. You have to finish it. So, okay, I finished all of the cooking, and we went to sit down at the table, and my husband stood there, and he says, I hope all of you enjoyed the meal. He said, but I'm sorry, Luella has to take me to the hospital now, which we did. But unfortunately, that was a big part of my life, is constantly going off to the emergency room, and he was hospitalized. At one point, when he had a valve replaced back in 1983, he was in the hospital 90 out of 190 days. Some friends of mine joked, they said, he's like a radio. When you take it in, it won't work at home, and when you take it in to be repaired, it works, But I said I still remember having to take him from a hospital in Buffalo in the middle of winter. By the way, we do get snow there, and along this highway going along Lake Erie, which is where most of the snow accumulates. And I'm taking him to Cleveland Clinic. They gave me medicine if he had some kind of an attack, and there was a trucker strike going on, and so there were snipers all over the road and snow, and worried about him. That was the worst 2.5-hour drive that I can remember, because I didn't know anything could have happened.
Oh my gosh, yeah. One of those things is terrifying, but you had all
three of them were going at one time.
Oh my gosh.
It's a good thing I was much younger then, because I don't know if I could do it now.
Yeah.
Well, probably when you have to do something, you do it, okay? And my philosophy, I guess it's not really a philosophy, but I just figure life has its ups and downs, and life presents a challenge, and it's the way you meet those challenges. Either you let them defeat you, or you defeat the challenge. And my philosophy is always, you defeat that challenge.
Yeah.
And you keep going. So it's gotten me to 87 years old.
That's true. And now you've had more challenges in your life than I think, everybody has their challenges, but you have in particular had a significant amount of serious challenges. And, obviously I know about them in your married life and the lives with your children in your home, but even let's go back a little bit into your childhood and some of those challenges, the things that you kind of broke the mold and overcame.
Well, from a very young age, and this was obviously at 87, not very many women went to college. I mean, they really...
And what year were you born?
I was born in 1937.
Okay.
So, and I graduated from high school in 1954, and I decided I was going to college. And nobody could change my mind. Fortunately, I had parents that agreed with me and cooperated with me. So here I was in 1954 going to the university nearby the house, and I was the only girl in science. I mean, at that time, first of all, there were 10 guys to one girl. At that time in the college, and most of the guys, macho guys, I think the only reason you're coming is to catch a man or something like that, which was very untrue. But anyway, I was the only girl. There were probably only 8 non-nurses in my class of 600 and something. And then maybe 30 nurses who really never were on campus. They were, in their own little realm. But and the other girls were in mainly education. Mm-hmm. So I'm in science, and the professor, I guess, didn't like. I guess he liked to tell little raunchy jokes or something, and he really did not like me. I mean, he did not like me being in his class. And you go back to the kitchen where you belong, he told me. But you know what? If you may not have noticed, but I'm a very stubborn person. I've made up my mind. See Ashley's smiling. See how she's smiling about that? Never mind, she's my clone. So anyway, she just, I just kept going and graduated and I'm sorry I didn't. I took some graduate courses, but I just figured that it was a burden on my parents and my mother, with only a sixth grade education, was very much in favor of my going, and she went to work. I mean, cleaning laboratories and washing laboratory glassware just so I could go to college.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like now that there's a lot of financial aid sometimes available, but I mean, that time there was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, I made it through.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that actually this year I actually got an award from my alma mater at commencement,
Mm-hmm.
which was very, I mean, it was kind of, can I just feel good about it? I mean,
Yes.
it was something about coming from your alma mater. I mean, not that, that really meant something to me.
Yeah.
It made me happy.
And what was the award?
The award was the Louise de Marillac Award, and she was a social worker, and it was reflective of some of the work I've been doing over the years and still doing at 87.
Right. And I'll ask you a little bit more about that. But first I want to ask you, you mentioned that your mother only had a sixth grade education and that she worked very hard so that you could go to college. And you've told me before, so I know this a little bit already, but her life kind of is sort of what inspired you to have your own career in education. Can you talk a little bit about your mom?
My mom, she was born in 1902, and she got married when she was 19 in 1921, and had my sister in 1922, and then right at the height of the Depression, they built a house and moved into it in 1928.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1929, at the height of the Depression, her husband, she was 26 and he was 29, and he was killed in an accident at the plant where he worked. He fell off some scaffolding or something. And so here at the height of the Depression, she took in boarders, and she was working. I mean, she often told me how she used to work 54 hours a week for $12 a week, which was unbelievable. I mean, and now when we look at it, and I suppose, I mean, I look at it when I first out of college started. Well, my first job, my only job that I worked at for 50 years, I was making $4,400 a year, and that was considered like really good money then.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you have to kind of compare these things.
Yes.
And the price, I can remember bread was 11 cents a loaf, and coffee was 59 cents a pound.
Yeah.
I mean, but certainly our wages. I remember when I first got married. Because I'm deviating a little bit here, but when I first got married, I spent $15 a week on groceries, and I mean, that included a lot of goodies too,
Mm-hmm.
But oh my, $50 a week, I don't get anything now. But anyway, my mother went on. I mean, she was a widow for 7 years, and
With a daughter,
well,
your older sister.
My sister was there with the daughter, but to me, when I was born, I felt that, I mean, in my head, I felt I had to be independent. I mean, fine, I got married, but I didn't want to be dependent upon my husband. I wanted to know that if something happened, I could take care of myself and knew how to take care of myself. And so I was sure that I needed an education, I needed a good job, and that's what I pursued.
Mm-hmm.
With like that. I mean, that was just me.
Yeah. And now your father, he came here from Italy, right?
My father was born in Italy, and he came here when he was 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And he was born in 1893. He came in 1908. And one of my biggest regrets now, and this is why this one hears it from me, and she's insisting that I have to talk, and she has to have a record of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, why didn't you ask all these questions? I mean, I'm sure he came over in steerage, and I'm sure he I mean, what the trip was like, and he came here and he lived with my great aunt, with his aunt, and worked around. He worked in coal mines. He worked in different things. I know he often told the story of almost being killed in eastern Pennsylvania in one of the coal mines. After that, he sort of didn't want to do that anymore. But in Niagara Falls had, I mean, their biggest employer there were the chemical plants, and he worked in a chemical plant, all which was not good. I mean, today we know the harm that those places, and we also have learned, that when you're working in places like that, personal protective equipment is necessary. None of those things, existed back in the late 30s, 40s, mid 50s. He retired in the mid 50s.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's very sad to think about. But and he never saw. He left in 1908 and never saw his mother and his sisters, because my grandmother had many miscarriages between my father, and finally he was born in 1893, and one sister was born in 1904 and the other one I think 1906, and so he left. One was a year old, one was 4.5, something like that, and so he never saw them from the time they were little children. And finally in 1950, backtrack a minute. So then my grandfather passed away in 1936, and my grandmother came to live, much to dismay. I mean, I learned because later in life I did meet at least one of his sisters, and it was very distressing. I'm sure for girls, for their mother to suddenly take off.
Yes.
But my grandmother came here, and when I was 6 months old, I remember it clearly. We went to six months old. We drove to New York City from Buffalo, and picked up my grandmother and she lived with us. I was only 9 when she passed away, which was devastating because, of course, we were very close to them. One important thing that came about, because we always spoke Italian to my grandmother and English to my parents, and there was a reason for that too. My father came from Tuscany, where the true language, Dante's language, was spoken, whereas Italy was only unified in 1860 something, or not 65, I think, and so they were all city states, and they all had different dialects, and they were quite different. They were quite different. I'll give you an example. In Sicilian, if you say babbo, it means an idiot. In Tuscan, it means father. So I was always in trouble because people on my mother's side of the family thought I was calling my father an idiot. But you know how easy it is for me to get in trouble anyway. I'm always there. Right? So what story of my life?
Yes.
But anyway, so I am very thankful that I learned Tuscan. And although my grandmother died when I was 9, which was extremely devastating to me, we went to. I was very interested in languages, and therefore I said that I continued. I went and studied a little bit, and then through my life and some of the things I've done in my life, I meet other Italians, both in my work and in my fun time, which was singing in a choir with my husband. So I was very thankful that I did learn the real language, mm-hmm. which now the dialects are not spoken there. It's the only places north of Venice they speak Friulian, which is actually considered a separate language. Don't ask me why, but that's.
Mm-hmm.
I have the book of poetry somebody gave me from up there, but I can't read it. But I am very thankful to maintain the language, and I try to maintain it as much as I can, because I just hate to forget it. I mean, I think it has come in handy. Yeah, come in handy. What happened was, singing with a choir, I wound up going to Italy with our choir, and I had to be the interpreter. I mean, I really was not that good. I mean, I had to get up on a stage and to translate from Italian to English, English to Italian. It was very tiring. We got one place, and they had an interpreter, and they said, "Oh," he says, "well, we never expect Americans to have interpreters." And I'm thinking, I'm going to get arrested. And I looked at him that night, and he says, "Oh no, it's better if you do it."
Oh.
I mean, I admit I understood what he was saying, and the people appreciated it. And I think, I took you to Italy at a very young age, and people kind of appreciate it. And when we went to the in Tuscany, to the town where my father was born, I mean, they were so appreciative I was doing that. You know how that man did a lot of work that day. And I got my father's birth certificate, and my grandmother's, and I got the marriage certificate, which, I mean, I thought was really great, and an experience. And even though I didn't know where my father lived in this town,
Right.
we still walked around just having the feeling of being close to
Yeah.
to the town. I think that similarly, well, when we went to Poland the first time, Grandpa was so excited, and he's so excited. And we get in the taxi to go to the hotel, and actually Poland was under military rule then, so it was kind of crazy the way things were working. And he said, "Well, how much is this?" And Grandpa was fluent in Polish, as you know. And he said, so the driver said, "Whatever you want to give me." And so then Grandpa turns around and looks at me. Instead of saying in English, he was going to give him $10 or whatever. He just says it in Polish and realizes what he said. But he was just so excited about being in Poland. I mean, which was nice. I mean, and that. But anyway, that's why I like to maintain the language. And Grandpa, even we went to Italy the first time, and my aunt was still living, my father's sister, and then I was there interpreting, and she kept going, "I want to talk to him so badly, and I want to talk to him so badly." I said, "Well, I don't know what I can do," But he came back, and he gone to the International Institute. He didn't have the vocabulary I had, but his pronunciation, everything. My aunt says, "I can see why you didn't marry an Italian." I mean, she just loved him.
Yeah, because he went after that first trip when he couldn't talk to your family. He came home. He secretly learned Italian, and then the next trip he was able to speak to them.
He was able to speak to them.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was really. He was very good in music, and he was very good in languages. I mean, he spoke a few languages, and he was fluent in Polish, which is not an easy language to learn.
No.
I always maintain that having a musical ear seems to help that, because you can hear things. I know I was doing some things with someone, and no matter what you said to her, the words, I mean, she just could not understand. I mean, sometimes even English words.
Who?
Oh, I don't want to say who.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, but I mean, it was, and it was, and the same with Italian words, but even in English words, because I mean, it was like you'd say a word, or you should hear something, and what would come back would be totally different, and I mean, just not that perception there. But I think that with music and in your ear, languages come more. You can come easier than than normal, because I know I worked Well, I worked in the Cancer Research Center for 50 years, doing preclinical testing of chemotherapeutic agents. And eventually, before the end of my career, I was managing one of the buildings. But anyhow, this place had people, which I think was a wonderful experience for me. Had people coming from all over the world. I mean, I even have a godchild in Brazil because I was. We talked about all those holiday tables. I was always, if somebody was from some other country was all alone, I always had them to the house. But anyway, I mean, I can't believe how valuable. I mean, I know I was working, I know I was getting paid, but the value of talking to these people, meeting these people, and learning about their culture and things, and sometimes I would pick up a few words in each language, you know.
Yeah.
What I would do is there was a woman from Hungary, you know, kind of it was a sad story. After World War II, she got stuck in Hungary, and her husband got stuck outside of Hungary because he had been in the military and couldn't come back in. And so, I mean, 13 years they were apart. She had three small children. So in 1956, she was able, during the Hungarian Revolution, she snuck across the border with her three children and eventually made it to the United States, to Buffalo. And she worked very hard. And this was one thing. A lot of these people, they were teachers, they were professionals, they'd come here and they'd have to take jobs as dishwashers and things, which was very sad. But I remember when she got here that her husband was sick. He was never able to work, and she would call him every lunchtime to make sure he was doing okay. But every lunchtime, I would get on she would give me the phone, and then I'd say, "Hojivan, you know, hi, how you doing?" You know, and I could say, "Hi, how are you doing? What are you doing?" He'd tell me Michinas, he was doing nothing, and then Visan Latash. So these few words, we had the same conversation every day. But anyway, it just was an interesting time. You know, later on, seeing people who were coming from, you know, I mean, many of they were exchange scientists, and you got to meet them, and they, I mean, it's just, and talk with them, and just know, I mean, I know people. It's funny, I can go almost any place. I can go to Finland, I can go to Japan, I can go to France. I mean, obviously Italy, I can go to Poland, and I know people in all these places, which was kind of convenient when the choir was singing around Europe and we go to different places. I don't think our director quite understood how I could know so many people and talk to them. But it's been an interesting life. It's been a difficult life in some places, but we make the best of it and try to improve whatever is
Yes. There. Now, working for Roswell,
right?
When you took that job, when you interviewed for that job at the beginning, and you retired, how long had you been working there?
50 years and a half.
50 and a half years. And what did the person who interviewed you say about hiring you?
Well, he told everybody not to hire me because I would only get married in a year and be gone. I was there much longer than he was. but I mean, it was so funny, and in the person I worked for many years, she wrote a letter. She was not living in the area at the time, and she wrote a letter saying that she's so glad she didn't listen to him. So, but I mean, it was just interesting. People just didn't want you. And then, you know, the irony of it is that I was sort of hired, you know, fresh out of college, and this Roswell at that time was under the state of New York's health department, and so we were following, their levels or steps and that for the employing. So they had this special thing for people, and how you would be hired at one level, after a year you'd go to another level, and whatever. But and so the personnel person did not quite understand this thing, and I mean, I was called down to the employment office, all the time. Sorry, employment office, it's HR now, but I'm reverting back to 58. And anyway, I'd have to describe when recruiters came, or not recruiters, but people from different colleges, and wanted to explain to the students and that, what was available. So he'd have me come down and explain it all to them. So I mean, it's strange. But as I say, I did get married. I did have family, but I still worked and still made it through. And I don't regret it. I just there were times because people from our area, people were transferring to someplace else, and I was offered a job at St. Jude's in Nashville, right? Tennessee, yeah. I mean, it's down Tennessee. I'm just senior moment. Sorry, everybody. and then somebody else was going. I was offered a job at Cornell, but I stayed where I was. And in fact, then even one time, Grandpa was offered a job down in Terrytown, and they offered me a job, but we decided to stay. I mean, one thing I think is that, and I don't know, maybe you could concur, maybe you probably say, oh my God, no. Where we felt that the children were close to the grandparents, and I felt, it made a difference.
Right.
And was important to them, and that. So anyhow.
Well, I think everybody, if you have parents and or the grandparents of your children, and that adds a richness to your life, and that's important to you, sometimes work, often, I won't even say sometimes, I think almost all the time, work and your career is not, it is an important part of your life, but it's not the most important part. The most important part, and at least I think so, is the relationships that you have and the people that you...
Well, I think so. I mean, I was out of school. The first job I was offered was in Albany. I'm in the kitchen and I'm like a nervous wreck. My mother said she could see I was nervous and she didn't know what was going on. And then the next thing, he was in the living room with my father. And of course, my father was a very emotional person. I mean, he was just very, and Grandpa's father was, I mean, he was more reserved. So anyway, he asked my father, and my father says, well, what? Well, he jumped up. And he went and Grandpa says, oh my God, he's mad, he's going to attack me or something, but he was just going to hug him, and so anyway, he says, well, it's up to Luella, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was it. So then that night, which was Christmas Eve, his family had this traditional, we talked about it earlier, about the traditional Christmas Eve, and in those days, his aunt had a restaurant, but they closed it, and then the whole family, I mean, it was my mother-in-law's sister, so I mean, and the whole family was there. So backtrack. Can I backtrack for a minute?
Of course.
So then we went to his family house, and so then finally everybody's running around getting ready for this big party to go to, and so I can still see Grandpa was sitting at the end of the stairs, and he's standing there, and he says, I want everybody to meet, and they're going, and everybody's busy, and they say, we know her,
Yeah.
He says, I want you to meet my fiance. Well, then, I mean, just the whole place burst out, and whatever.
Yeah.
The hugging and kissing and all of that sort of stuff going on. And so then we went to the party, and of course, I mean, all the excitement because all the family was there.
Right.
And that. And then afterwards we went to Aunt Toots's for some reason. And I'm saying to Aunt Toots, you know, she says, well, you already had you. I says, no, but this is your future brother-in-law, you know.
Yes.
So, but anyway, so there was all that excitement. And Grandpa got so excited, we were driving and he ran out of gas.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we ran out of gas, and so anyhow, then we had to get gas in the car and whatever.
Oh my
But
gosh.
anyhow, there was so then we had Christmas dinner at with my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and then he said, well, so then we decided when we're going to get married. I mean, now it takes 2 years or something like that. So we got married. We got engaged on December 23rd, unofficially, officially on the 24th.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I said, well, you know, I always wanted to get married on my parents' wedding anniversary. And so we picked June 6th and we went from there. So within 5.5 months, we were married.
Oh wow.
You know, so I mean, it's just,
Mm-hmm.
so then, I don't know, crazy people that we are, where do you go on a honeymoon? So, I mean, now the honeymoons tend to be more exotic, but people used to go either to the Poconos or they used to go to, but I always wanted to go up to New England. So we drove up to New England and so we made it, I don't know where we made it the first night, and because we had an afternoon reception. And so and I had the orchid. It was sitting in the front. And so I said, he goes to register in this hotel. It was a motel, and so I mean, and the guy could see the corsage, and so the Grandpa said, "Oh, well, we're on our honeymoon." You have to tell people, you know. And so anyhow, we did that. We went up to New England, and then we went up as far as Maine, and then we took a ferry to Nova Scotia, and from Nova Scotia we went to Prince Edward Island, because I always wanted to go to Prince Edward Island. Well, this was the beginning of June, and you just don't go to Prince Edward Island in the beginning of June. Nothing is opened. I mean, nothing is, you know, I mean, it was not like not nowadays how you plan everything. And
Right.
So we get to Prince Edward Island, and there's only one place, and it still exists, Shaw's Inn. I have some pictures of it, actually. My good friend Lou and Rose, they went up to Prince Edward Island. They knew we spent a honeymoon there. They brought me back all these postcards with the picture.
Aww.
And they took pictures of the place, Shaw's Inn.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the literary societies of Canada were meeting. So, I mean, it was like when you went to eat, you had tables assigned to you. So we go to sit down, and this is the guy, etc. And what literary society do you, of course, Grandpa, we're on our honeymoon.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was it. Actually, this man was really nice. And you know how they always give all these little trinkets out?
Mm-hmm.
He saved them all for me and gave them to me.
Aww.
At
Yeah.
the end. But so we stayed there, and then we went back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about it. You know, we had a small we had a 2-bedroom apartment, actually. 1 bedroom had nothing in it, and
Mm-hmm.
we had no furniture, actually, because the first week or so we had a bedroom set we had bought, and but the first week we would sit on a towel in the living room. Grandpa had some pieces of furniture. He had a stereo,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of stands, and he had a very nice, which Uncle Stephen has now, a little cabinet that opened up, and then he had a few pieces. So we had those in the living room, and then we had a television on top of the
Mm-hmm.
cabinet. But we'd sit on a towel for, I mean, probably the first week or two till we got around to be able to buy, you know, get some furniture bought. But
Yeah.
we did have a kitchen table too. I mean, it was sort of one of these old-fashioned kitchen tables with the kind of enamel with the chairs around it, and that we had it for a long time, actually.
Yeah.
Until it just. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember if it was still around, but anyway,
Mm-hmm.
it was going.
Was it an oval?
No, it was rectangular,
Oh, okay.
but and so we were in that apartment. We stayed in that apartment for 2 years, and then we bought our first house, our first house. I mean, of course, Grandpa was always, he sees something he wanted, whereas I'm more a deliberator on things,
Mm-hmm.
And so, but he saw this house, he really liked this house. And meanwhile, I was expecting your father, and meanwhile, we had decided we were going to have one last fling, and we saw this. I mean, now listen to this price. We saw that there was this price. It was from New York City. It was something to do with I think the union from where I worked. It was one in their brochures for $155 for a week. You could fly from New York City and go to this place in the Bahamas, and you had everything, your food, your accommodations, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, crazy as we were, we booked it.
Mm-hmm.
So we booked it. We booked it, several months in advance, and so then we went to. So then we wound up buying this house. So we moved into the house the day before we were leaving for the Bahamas.
Oh my.
And the boxes were like all in the house.
Yeah.
And then the house it was a split level, but the front windows, I mean, they were gigantic. I mean, everybody kept wondering how we're going to get draped square. I'll get to that story later. And so anyway, when we had, so we went to the Bahamas, and then every night we kept saying we wanted to see, we wanted to go to one nightclub at least,
Mm-hmm.
and so every night I'd eat dinner, and then I said I'm going to rest for a little bit, but then I was too tired to go anyplace.
Right.
So the very last night, I finally said, I'm not going to lay down. We went to see. I think they were called the Korean. They were famous at the time. The Korean Kittens. They were like three sisters. I probably have that name wrong. I'm sorry. I can't remember everything.
Yeah.
But we did go to see them. So then we go and so the next day we check out our room, and then there's this line because there were two plane loads that came down, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting, and finally, the engine on one plane, I said there was something wrong with it, and so because there was a man with a wheelchair on the other plane, they put that group on first, so we had to recheck back into our rooms.
Oh gosh.
And stay an extra day till we could, till we could fly back, so we got an extra day out of it. And,
Yeah.
So we wound up with food in a room that we didn't pay for, that was on the airline or whatever it was. I don't know. Whoever paid for it.
Right.
I know we didn't. So then we came home, and the house. So I neglected to say, we're running around buying this house, and so then and we were busy trying to leave and everything else, and they said try to leave, to leave and to move. Well, we wanted to move and get a mover, so we get to the lawyer to do the final closing. They said you can't close, the house isn't finished yet. So then we had a thing where we wound up moving because we'd already given notice in our apartment and we couldn't go back, and so we had to move in and wind up paying $200 a month rent for the house while they finished off. The house was livable. It was like the tiny little things that needed
Yeah.
finishing. So this would happen. We're paying this sort of stuff, and then it just seemed like our basement kept backing up. I mean, basements were backing up, and
Like with water? What do you mean
with
backing
water,
up?
like sludge and stuff. I mean, it
Okay.
was rather ugly. It was making me nervous, and so then this was like the end of May. It was the beginning. Oh, and besides that, we moved into this house, and then screens didn't come with it, or storm windows. We had to buy all that stuff. I don't know. We were very young and naive, I swear.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyhow, we moved into this house in the beginning of June, and it turns out to be a very hot summer.
Okay.
So it was just when those awful, ugly avocado appliances came out.
Oh,
they
those
were
are
the
cool
fad.
again. Yeah.
They was a fad. And so anyhow, the stove came with the house, and we had to buy a refrigerator. So then we wanted a refrigerator, and I wanted it with the right door, and the door wasn't to open right, but then it came in the wrong way, and this was like
What do you
after
mean?
7 weeks. There's left-handed doors and right-handed doors that the way they open, and so we thought, I don't know why, but we were mistaken, and it came in. We got the right thing to start with, but anyway, it had been 7 weeks. It was a very hot summer, and I used to stop. I'm pregnant. I used to stop for hot dogs on the way home every night. I mean, we couldn't keep drinks. I mean, sometimes I'd wake up in the morning and where's Grandpa? I can't find him. He's down in the basement sleeping. I mean, because it was very hot, and we had no screens for the window, and we couldn't open the windows. I mean, it was a very difficult time, and so.
And you had no refrigerator?
No refrigerator, no windows, no screens on the windows. I mean, it was a difficult time.
My goodness.
And so anyhow, so we lived. So anyway, we made it through that, and your father was born at the beginning of August. By that time, we had screens, and by that time, we had we had set up the nursery really cute, and I think someplace I still have those drapes. Who knows? They're probably disintegrated by now, but I had cute little nursery room drapes and everything, and like two crazy people. Well, we had everything. Even had a little blanket on the crib, and I had a bassinet and in there, and everything was just perfect. I mean, I thought it was just perfect. Oh, yeah. I had this armoire when I was growing up, so Grandpa painted it white, and it had like one big door here where you could hang like babies' things, and the other side was like little drawers to put stuff. And so we put all of these nursery decals on it and that. So anyhow, so your father was born, and I guess I was just as crazy as I still am, but no, I shouldn't say that because I don't know. The day before your father was born, I cleaned the house. I washed every window inside and out, and we had stupid storm windows that made it like you had to wash them. They stayed, but you had to wash all 4 windows on each window in the house, and ran up and down, went to the market shopping, and then we were supposed to go to a picnic the next day, and I started baking. I baked a cake and made all kinds of food to take to the picnic, and it was supposed to be a work picnic, and we were the closest to the picnic grounds, and we were supposed to go and hold the tables while the other people from Grandpa's lab, now were coming. They're depending on us, and obviously because and so then I finally went outside. It was like very hot, and I went to sit outside while I was waiting for I had baked a cake, and everything was hot, and I wanted to wash everything and keep everything neat. So I went outside. We're sitting on the porch, and then the neighbors called us over, and then the neighbors telling me that her husband had to go in the house because he was a nervous wreck. Particularly, we had all those sliding glass doors, and I was up there watching everything and whatever doing, and I made him nervous, and so we wound up there till 1 o'clock in the morning. So
where were you?
At the neighbors.
Oh, okay.
And so anyhow, then I came home and I walked directly into the kitchen, and Grandpa said, I said, I'm going to wash those dishes. Oh, he said, you can do it tomorrow. I said, no, Christopher will probably come tonight. I said, I don't want to leave anything, whatever. So sure enough, I cleaned up the kitchen, and 3 o'clock in the morning, I began feeling a little strange, and I went and I said, well, I better take a shower, and whatever, and by this time I'm making Grandpa so nervous. And I went into the shower, shaving my legs, and he's looking at me like, so he says, well, what can I do for you? I said, well, I have my suitcase packed, put the toothbrush in, those last minute things. And so I come out of the shower and he's in bed. He says, I hope you don't mind. I'm not feeling too well.
Oh, no. Oh.
So anyway, we go to the hospital. And of course, he goes out the door and the other part of our street wasn't finished yet. Where Aunt Hilda lives. And she had, so the street was bumpy around. And then we're on the way to the hospital. And all of a sudden, the labor, oh, I know, we're laying in bed counting labor pains. So I mean, I thought, I just don't know how to count what I'm doing. So I said, I have one with 7 minutes, 6 minutes, 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes. And it was 2 minutes. And they say 2 minutes, you have to call the doctor. And I thought, I must be doing this wrong. And I had this big thing. I did not want to go into the hospital and have them send me home. You know, I mean, it was
Wait,
really,
so you were not at the hospital in bed, you were at home in
I was
bed.
at home in bed, yeah.
And your labor pains were 2 minutes apart.
Yeah. So anyway, we go to the hospital. Do you want to hear all this?
Yeah, tell me.
So anyway, we go to the hospital, and then I said, oh, my pain stopped. I said, but I said, oh, I don't know whether I should go home or not, you know, I mean. But anyway, we went to the hospital, and then this was my first one, and there were other people there that were having their second and third. So they kind of ignored me. And anyhow, I guess Grandpa went out to call somebody, or call. I don't know. He went to call. I think he went to call my mother, and they wouldn't let him make it in the room because somebody saw me, and they said, "Oh, they're calling the doctor to get there, and he's on the other side of town," and I was going to have the baby any time, and sure enough, I mean, I just went in, had the baby, no problem. And it drove everybody else that was screaming. I was quiet as a mouse, you know, not anything.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah, I was quiet as, you know, and then suddenly, you know, the other people, they were really mad at me. But I mean, if we're on this subject, I'll finish the subject with the 3 sons then.
Wait, you're saying all these other people were really mad at you? Why are they really mad at you?
Because they were in there in labor, and they were in labor for another 12 hours.
Oh.
I went in at 6:30 in the morning and had this baby at 9:30.
Oh.
9:25 to be exact.
Okay.
I mean, and so they were not very happy campers.
Oh.
You know, what can I tell you? And then this was an interesting thing because, you know, most of these women were used to staying home and watching soap operas, and I mean, I had no interest in a soap opera, and I had no, you know, they don't. My roommate always went to some other room so she'd have somebody to talk to because I didn't, you know, and then as I say, so that's what happened. Of course, I came home, and from the hospital. In those days, they kept you 5 days in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came home, and I had prepared all this stuff in advance. But Grandpa sometimes would get these brilliant ideas. We were going to have a patio, concrete poured. So he decided he was taking that day from work to pick me up. So he had the concrete, and my godfather actually, he was a mason, and so he came to help him. So
on the day you bring the baby home?
Yeah.
They start this patio?
Yeah.
Oh my.
I mean, it's some. I mean, there's sort of other things, but you know, that was Grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
With Stephen, he was inviting people to come over and had me cooking the day after I came home. You know, that was Grandpa.
Oh, I would have killed him. You didn't kill him?
Anyway, well, I mean, it was him. It was him.
Okay.
I mean, he always pitched in, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was it. And then my mother, I had gotten ordered, no such thing as disposable diapers. So I had gotten for the beginning to get diaper service, and I think I went through 12 diapers in the first 2 hours. My mother said, she said, at this rate, you know.
Yeah.
She tried to put me under control, you know, but anyhow, so that was it. I had taken 3 months off from work, and I was just being a mommy.
Yeah.
And somebody came down because I was singing to the baby all the time and going on and on, crazy me.
Yeah. Now you said you wanted to end it on the story of the three boys. What
Well,
did you mean?
I just thought the 3 pregnancies were all. I mean, my pregnancies that never, my labors, they never seemed to be labors. I mean, I just had the babies. And
you mean they weren't difficult? Like
they were not
like
difficult.
you've heard other women talk about how painful
I know.
and difficult.
I mean, I didn't know this, but
You got very lucky.
I got very lucky, and like then when Uncle Stephen was born, by this time I was singing with the chorus, and so and I had this cute little gown that I wore, but then the ladies, because the final day of singing the conventions, they get all the choirs from all over the country and we sing together. I mean, with give a concert.
Okay.
And it was quite a bit of standing as opposed to the competition where you went up and you sang 2 songs and you were off. You know, it was no big deal. But the ladies, and if you didn't show up at that, then they would disqualify your chorus or whatever. But the ladies, even from the other choruses in Buffalo, they says, "You're not standing there," and so they made me get out of, and I went up to my room.
Okay.
But anyhow, I was very active with Uncle Stephen. I worked up to Monday night, and he was born Tuesday morning. Your father, I wanted to work 1 more week, and Grandpa says, "No, you're not driving from Buffalo to Niagara Falls. You're just." And I really would have worked another week, but then if I had worked the other week, then he would have been. I would have worked up to Friday, and he was born on Saturday.
Okay.
And so anyhow, then but I mean I worked. As I say, I worked constantly, plus working around the house, plus doing all sorts of things, and I was crazy even then. Yeah. And so then with Uncle Stephen, they told me my due date was the 23rd of August, and he came the 23rd of July. And so, I mean, I wasn't even thinking about it, but it was kind of funny because, at Roswell, the GYN clinic was right up above where my lab was, and those guys kept telling me that baby's going to be born before August 1st. And so I'd go to my GYN guy, "No, he's going to come the 23rd of August, he kept insisting. So anyhow, I suddenly went into labor, and so Grandpa went quickly to get your beast Nonni, and beast Nonni's great grandma, and so when my mother, thinking it was a false alarm, I had washed all of these maternity clothes. She's ironing all of them. I said, "What did you do that for? I didn't need them,
Yeah.
but anyway, probably was keeping her busy anyway, whatever. But I mean, we had Christopher, your father, so there. So anyhow, he, that's, I mean, I was very angry because he came very fast, and by 7:30 in the morning, which was change of shift, and they got mad at me and they put a gas mask over me, and I was really very angry because with your father, I absolutely watched his birth. I had the mirror, and I mean, they couldn't understand. I said, "I want to see what's going on," I mean, and this, but that happened, and
so you're saying with Uncle Stephen, it was shift change and they wanted the birth to happen faster.
Well, yeah.
They wanted it to be done and over with.
Well, yeah.
So it was more convenient, so they put a gas mask
on me, and I was really furious because I said, I want natural childbirth. The first time the doctor's arguing with me, and he's saying, "No, you need an epidural," and I said, "No." And then with Uncle Stephen, first of all, he was coming so fast that the doctor, my doctor, was across town, and they had to call the other OB guy who had been out on, he had had heart surgery, and he had been out on heart surgery, and they had to call him in, and then he's trying to give me an epidural, and it would thank God would work, but then they give me the gas mask. I said, you just have to stand up for yourself. But anyway, Uncle Stephen was born, and I brought him home, and I put him in the little cradle that I had, and your father promptly goes there with a plum, trying to feed his brother. He just wanted to share with his brother. I mean, he didn't get anything in his mouth or anything like that. But anyway, so that was Uncle Stephen. Uncle John was really, first of all, after that episode with Uncle Stephen, I said, I'm having this baby the way I want to have this baby, and don't anyone, I said, bother me. So anyway, because I was mad, I said, don't bring a gas mask near me. Don't be whatever. So I go in to the into the hospital, and it was about 6 days before his due date. So Grandpa goes into the admissions office, and they said, oh, she's not supposed to be here till next Thursday, and she's having a mastectomy. And poor Grandpa walks out, and he thinks I'm keeping something from him or something, I mean, he doesn't know what to think. I mean, I can't blame him. So he comes out, and he very dully says, well, they said you're not supposed to be here till Thursday, and that you're having surgery then. I said, look, I'm here today, and I'm having this baby today.
Yeah.
Whatever. So then later he told me that they said a mastectomy. I mean, he was really beside himself. He just didn't know what to think.
Right.
And so anyway, so I get up to I get up, I have him, very quickly. I mean, and they kept trying to give me something. I said, I'm having this baby. Don't anybody come near me. You come near me, I'll get off this table, I'll go home and have this baby by myself, I was very adamant. I mean, this baby was going to be the way I wanted it. And so he was.
Now, something I have always been curious about and never got the chance to ask you is, you're, I would say, a feminist. Would you agree?
I would agree.
And when you were born, it was not legal for women to have their own bank account. Is that right?
That's right. I even tried to get a charge account later on. And what was funny, because it was in the mall and they were giving away a frying pan. I went to sign up and I said, no, I want it in my own name. And they didn't want to give it to me. And so I walked away. Actually, they called me back and gave it to me then. Okay. It was with Montgomery Ward.
What year was that?
I would say mid-70s.
Okay. Even in the mid-70s, they would not let you?
They would not, no.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember getting your first bank account?
Well, when we were children, my parents, started a little bank account from each one of us. Mm-hmm. And my own individual bank account was when I started working in 1958.
Okay.
I wasn't married then or anything, but I had a bank account.
So when you started working in 1958, you went and got a bank account for that?
Right.
Okay. Did they give you a hard time? What was that process like?
No, I just went in and I got it.
Okay.
I didn't have a hard time on a bank account, but I know definitely charge accounts or things like that, and I don't know. It would be interesting to talk to someone who never married of that era, mm-hmm. if they had any problems. And I say they didn't want to give it to me without my husband's name, and I just walked away.
Okay.
I mean, the only reason I was looking at the frying pan they were giving.
Right. Now, with the bank account, they never asked for your father's information or if you were married or anything? Did they just were...
I don't remember them ever asking any of that stuff.
Okay. And what about your first... Was that in the 70s, that Montgomery Ward card? Was that your first charge card, or when did you get your first charge account?
Well, charge accounts were not that popular. Mm-hmm. And then they started with like Master and Visa charges probably in the 80s. And I'm trying to think back. I think most of them were in Grandpa's name at the beginning. You just didn't give it any thought. Mm-hmm. And eventually, I did have, well, that Montgomery Wards was definitely in my name
Mm-hmm.
from day one, and then I sort of, once MasterCard that came in, you just didn't
Right.
use those, and I got rid of it. But
So now earlier we had kind of discussed you've had a lot of difficulties in your life.
a few.
Mm-hmm. And challenges you have had to overcome to get here to 87 years. Mm-hmm. And we talked about school, being in college as a woman in science, and then getting a job in science as a woman. But you have also had a lot of personal challenges as well. And you've spoken to me before about you've had one year in particular that was extremely difficult for you. And can you talk a little bit about that year and share a little bit about that year, and maybe talk afterward to what that year taught you or what grew inside of you during that year?
In 1978, a very difficult year. It seemed like no matter where I turned, something would go wrong. Like a small little tornado went through our yard and destroyed our furniture. I had a fire in our garage because some friend of Grandpa's had come over and lit a lit cigarette in the garbage, and then it exploded into a fire. I had a car accident, and even when Grams went to pick up, my mother-in-law went to pick up my husband because we were down to one car, somebody else came through and rammed their car. It seemed like, wherever we went, whatever we did, there was something happen. And in the midst of all of these catastrophes happen, our youngest son, John Allen, became ill, and he was in the hospital in Niagara Falls for 1 month, and then he went into remission. He was diagnosed with an immune response disease called minimal lesion nephrosis, and so it was like the whole summer working with him. After he was released from the hospital in Niagara Falls, he was referred to. There's a large children's hospital in Buffalo, New York, and we went there, and they said he had the best disease because he would outgrow it. And we just kept going back and forth. But unfortunately, he would go into remission. When he'd come home, then it recurred, and then he'd go in the hospital, and he went into remission, and this happened 3 or 4 times. Finally, in September of 1978, in the middle of the night, I knew there was something wrong with him, and so I had him with me, and I remember Grandpa went and slept on the couch, the poor guy, but I just knew something was wrong with him, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, he started going into convulsions, and I screamed for Grandpa, and we went to the hospital, and let me backtrack. I had taken him back and forth to the doctors for a month, and they just said he had allergies. Finally, after 1 month, I got the pediatrician that I preferred, and she immediately saw that it was this minimal lesion nephrosis and put him in the hospital. And so then we rushed to the emergency room. I'm backtracking now back to the convulsions. And so fortunately, this pediatrician, in the middle of the night, she came out, and she said, well, he has to go right to Children's Hospital. They got an ambulance, and the ambulance driver didn't know how to get to Children's Hospital. This crazy mother that was not in any shape had to get in the ambulance and direct the ambulance how to get to Children's Hospital.
Oh, wow.
And so he went there to Children's Hospital, was in a coma for several days, and then he finally came out of the coma. When he came out of the coma, he kept seeing things, which I guess is something normal after being, he kept telling me to wipe the blood off my face. And then he kept saying he saw his father standing there when he wasn't there. and just, just went on like that. And it was very scary. It was very scary. But anyway, we were in the hospital for a few days after he came out of the coma. And I knew he still was not good, but he, the doctor sent him home. And I was arguing, and John was the type of person, just a very sweet little boy. He always cared for others. For 7 years old, and he just um, he always say he was okay, and so the doctor sort of made his little sign like this, like there was something wrong with me rather than with John. So I took him home. It was in the fall, and we were walking along, and the chestnuts were coming down from the tree, and I remember him picking them up. And then we got home, and we went to my mother's, and she was preparing supper. So we rang the doorbell, and he's hiding. He says, "Tell Nonni I didn't come," and he, I mean, he was like that. He was like to joke around. So we had supper, and this was Friday, and on Saturday, he's talking to my mother on the phone, and he's telling her he's fine, and no, Nonni, you can't talk, you can't get upset like that because you're going to be sick. He says, "I'm fine," and I mean, he wasn't fine because. Uh, 3 days later, he died.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody seemed to understand what was happening. We rushed him back to Children's Hospital, and he was outside. He couldn't breathe, and whatever. It turned out that he had, from taking this prednisone for the condition he had, it caused blood clots, and they went to his lungs, and he went into cardiac arrest. And I mean, it was devastating. It was. How do I explain that? I mean, this sweet little boy, that all he ever thought about when I made he died 2 weeks after his 7th birthday, and when I made the cupcakes for his class, and the first thing he thought about was, Tracy can't eat these. That was his little friend. And I said, "Well, I know Tracy can't eat them." I said, "But her mother makes sure that she has something that she can eat in school, because I don't know what she could eat or what couldn't eat." But I mean, that was his first thought. That's the kind of person. And that same year for my birthday, he said to me, "Mommy, don't have a birthday. Don't have a birthday. You can't have a birthday." And I sometimes flip into the wrong times. I said, "Oh, you just don't want to buy me a birthday present. No, Mommy, please, Mommy, don't have a birthday, because you're going to get sick and die if you have a birthday." That same year, he died 2 weeks after his birthday. And I mean, that was a very devastating time. I couldn't, I couldn't, didn't know what was happening. I mean, you can sort of imagine. I mean, this beautiful boy, I wasn't, I think I walked around, I don't know, somewhere. Not, I can still remember when I finally went back to work. And I mean, I didn't feel like talking to anyone. I didn't feel like, sometimes, I mean, even before I did that, I would just lay in bed all day long and not, I mean, it was terrible. I mean, terrible to try and function and do anything. And then, I mean, besides that, the children, it was difficult on the children. I mean, Stephen developed anorexia. Um, and I had to take him for counseling, and I mean, both Stephen and Christopher, they were bringing all their treasures and they were putting them in the casket, just because, I mean, they were devastated. They were just devastated, and they couldn't go on. I mean, for anything. I mean, and so it was very hard, and Grandpa was beside himself, and I mean, and sometimes, I mean, we were just so inside ourselves that it was even hard to do anything. But it's just something you can't imagine unless it happens to you. I mean, it's just that way, and I always felt Stephen, John was the glue between the other two brothers. Somehow or another, they all related, and I don't know, it was just something like that. But anyhow, I mean, you get through it, but with great difficulty. And this is 46 years later now. I mean, I still it's here in my heart. I have, as you know, I've spent the last 46 years well, because his death was something very unusual. His death, we found out later, the morning of his funeral, New York State Department of Health published on the front page of the local newspaper that they were investigating his death because it was unusual for a 7-year-old to die. Um, and so then I became involved because meanwhile, through all of this, in my neighborhood, there was an eruption, there was an evacuation of homes because there was 20,000 tons of chemicals buried a block and a half from my house that was known as Love Canal. It was known internationally, this disaster that happened, and the chemicals kept coming into the backyard. And when this happened, um, as a research scientist, and my husband was a chemist, we went to study his disease more to the medical libraries. And I'll tell you, it was very shocking to find out that his disease was definitely related to the exposure to the chemicals at Love Canal, our backyard. Later on, we found out it had 32 parts per billion of dioxin. 1 part per billion is conservatively agreed upon as toxic from the EPA, but certainly much less is even toxic. And so we had 32 parts where he played, and suddenly our son died, our house was burglarized, and it just seemed like, there was no end to 1978. At Christmas time, my sister-in-law said, I don't think you should stay home. She had us come down to Florida. So we went down to Florida for Christmas. And on New Year's Eve, the children wanted to go. They wanted to stay up till midnight. And so to keep them quiet and peaceful, we gave them flashlights. She lived a block from the ocean. And we were walking towards the ocean. Stephen, my middle son, ran across A1A on New Year's Eve and was hit by a car. And I saw him flying through the air. And I don't know, I still, in my heart, and I know that John was there and picked him up and had him land on sand as opposed to the hard concrete, asphalt, whatever was on the road. But I still, we went to the emergency room, and I sat in that emergency room and I watched that clock, hit midnight, ending 78, which I don't think, a year could be more disastrous than that. It was horrible, it was terrible, and I just didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, I never heard from the New York State Department of Health, and the Commissioner of Health for New York State came to a local meeting at Love Canal, and I bravely stood up. My knees were shaking, and I told him, I said, I understand that my son passed away a few months ago, and that you are, we're going to investigate his death. And, oh yes, Mrs. Kenny, this is the Commissioner of Health, we've investigated this thoroughly, but we feel it's a private matter, and we will call my office and we will talk about it privately. And I thought, well, okay, that's okay. So that's fine. So I called his office every day from February until June and finally got an appointment. Meanwhile, in between there, I had been complaining because the creek in our backyard had orange precipitate, and I made even a log of this whole thing, and tried to be proactive, but I was still, remaining objective about the whole thing. So they finally, because of my complaining so much, New York State sent the chief toxicologist for the state of New York, plus another toxicologist was there, and then a watchdog from the assembly. So we're all looking at the creek, and Meanwhile, a bird flies in, drinks the water, and drops dead in front of them. And everyone got excited. They put the bird in my freezer, and just sort of whatever they were doing, but they were just getting too excited, and they said they were going to analyze it. Well, this was like maybe 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. By 10 o'clock the next morning, they're calling me and they're saying the bird died of parasitic worm infestation. I mean, how they had time, because there was sleeping time in there too, how they could have analyzed the bird and had this answer. And so I just said, well, avians have a higher tolerance to parasitic worms. Why are you saying that? Well, we'll investigate it further. So finally in June, when I met with Commissioner Axelrod, he came in and said the bird was young and died of a virus. Stupid answer anyway. I said, did you measure for dioxin? No, it's too expensive to do that. I mean, human life, I guess, is not worth anything. But anyway, it was at that point where I became very angry and realized that they were lying to me. I mean, they kept telling me to go back. Meanwhile, they were evacuating people from the homes we were living in, hotels, which living in hotels, to many people, they thought we were living in hotels and that was a big vacation. You don't go live in a hotel for 2.5 months with 2 young children. It's not a vacation. It's not a vacation at all. And so we went to, so as we were in the hotel. Meanwhile, in order to stay in the hotel, they asked for a doctor's letter every week. And so so I called, my husband's cardiologist, and I wasn't going to blame his heart disease existed before Love Canal, but I said, I don't think it's good for him to be living there. Well, the cardiologist, he says, oh, I've been wondering. He says, he's been deteriorating so rapidly, and I couldn't figure out. He says, you cannot go back to that house. Not at all. So he gave me a letter voluntarily every week. I'd go there and it was on his desk and I just brought it in. Whereas many of the doctors were charging for it, and it was just, so anyhow, they told us we had to leave the hotels, that they were paying while they were doing the digging and doing remedial work on the canal. Love Canal, perhaps the name is kind of strange, but there was a gentleman named William Love. Back in 1898, he decided he was going to build a canal from the upper Niagara River to the lower Niagara River. The Niagara River, which is reasonable, is not navigable because otherwise you go over Niagara Falls.
Right.
And so anyway, he felt that he would build it and they could put industry because there would be water there. However, there was a depression in 1898. Not only that, Tesla discovered alternating current, so you didn't have to be by water. And this guy, William Love, was kind of a scoundrel and kind of took off and left everybody holding the bag, as seems to be happening all the time. But that's what happened there. So the canal stayed open and sitting there for a long time. And in the early 1940s, one of the local, it was called Hooker Chemical Company, later purchased by Occidental Petroleum, they started bearing chemicals there. And then they decided to sell it to the city of Niagara Falls for $1. I mean, they claimed that they told them, but the city wanted to build a school, and the school was on this property, and the kids were all getting sick in the school, and then they'd walk out, and then they built homes right on top of the canal, so everything was seeping into the basements, and the kids would walk across that area and pick up stones, and then they would explode, and some of them even got some bad eye damage with it, and a lot of things happened. So this was going on, and a local newspaper reporter did quite a research, and then they came in August 2nd, 1978, and evacuated the first 239 homes that were right on there. but the chemicals had spread. As you say, my house a block and a half away had 32 parts per billion of dioxin in the backyard. And so this is just a background I'm giving. And so anyway, Occidental tried to say they were not to blame.
Mm-hmm.
The government finally sued them. I mean, and they did it because they had this dump site, but they also had another dump site up further north in the city that was spewing mercury into the lower Niagara River.
Oh.
And then they had another dump site right next to the city drinking water that was sending chemicals. So I mean, you know, and they could try and, but they really didn't want people to know about the other two dump sites. I mean, it was very, as a side note, because I became an activist at this point, I was in California giving a talk in favor of a resolution on the proxy vote for corporate responsibility, and as soon as someone started talking about in front of the shareholders, started talking about the other ones, he had him removed physically from the area, and then he didn't. I had already given my 5-minute speech. I was the only one out of 3 that was allowed to finish 5 minutes, and he told me to go back to Buffalo. Didn't even know Love Canal was in Niagara Falls. He told me to go back to Buffalo because President Carter had declared an emergency that day, and they were supposed to buy the houses. And so anyway, anyway, after my speech, I went to one of the microphones and to continue my argument, and he was an old man. I say that with reverence now at my age, because this was in 1980. I mean, 40 some years ago. And so he said, okay. He called on me, and I opened my mouth, and he looked at me, and he said, "You're determined for publicity." And I said, "I'm determined that no other child will die because of corporate irresponsibility." And he says, "You're lucky you're a woman." Here we go back again to that part. "You're lucky you're a woman, because otherwise you'd meet the same fate as your friend, you know, being dragged out of the..." I said, I don't care, I'm here, drag me out, I don't care, you know. But it was frightening. And following that, I don't know if it's true, I mean, I don't know, but I was with the other person that was one of the speakers, and we went outside, and we were watching the light, and when the light turned green, we started to cross the street, and this car comes chasing after us. So we became very frightened. I mean, it may have been coincidental, I have no way, but it was noon on that day, and our flight was leaving at 11 o'clock at night, and we went to the airport, and we stayed there until 11 o'clock at night, because I mean, we were frightened. We really didn't know, because I mean, there have been, you know, Karen Silkwood and all of these things you hear. So anyhow, we flew back, and it was scary. But anyway, so this is just a brief history of what, you know, why it was called Love Canal and what actually happened. Because if I say it just abstractly, a lot of people don't realize it. But anyway, I became very, very active at that point, and spoke many places, and fought. There's many. There are many references on. I'm at the point where we're taping this. If you go online on YouTube, when you're on YouTube already, but if you go, I mean, there's a Poisoned Ground that PBS did a 2-hour documentary on, and also I suddenly discovered there was a documentary made in 1980 called The Love Canal Family, and I mean, but there are many. Love Canal Family is strictly about our family. That wasn't very pleasant, though, having the camera following you around for 4 months and everything you did. I mean, it was very, and the whole time, you know, it was very stressful for us. I mean, people committed suicide. All these babies were born with birth defects, and we're out there fighting and trying to save our families. And sometimes what because the chemical industry was so big in the city of Niagara Falls, the the chemical, the many of the husbands worked in the chemical industry, and then they'd argue with the wives, and you'd hear them arguing, and then I know that one gentleman walked over to the middle of the Rainbow Bridge is a bridge between Niagara Falls, New York, and Niagara Falls, Canada, and jumped off. I mean, another one from a block from my house, he hung himself, and I mean, a whole family, the mother, the father, the adult children all committed suicide. I mean, it was an enormous amount of stress on families, and I mean, and we just never knew where we were going, what we were doing, and then they would give us all these little lollipops like they were going to do something along the way, but they were trying to get us to go away. I mean, in fact, I even maintain that the New York State Department of Health saying they were investigating John's death was just to show they were doing something, because now that we're back to John's death, I finally did get a meeting with the Commissioner of Health, and the Commissioner of Health walked into the room and he said, stop flagellating yourself and go on with your life. There's nothing wrong with the children at Love Canal. They play football and they rupture their kidneys. Okay, this was a trigger. John had an immune response disease. I mentioned earlier that it had the name nephrosis because the protein went through the kidneys. But he had no thymus gland. The thymus gland, he was my only child born there. And your immune response develops between 0 and 2. And he had no thymus gland, which is what causes the immune response, the immune system to develop. And so, and he's telling me this, there's nothing wrong with, and he's telling me about the kidneys. This told me that he had not even looked at John's autopsy. An autopsy that as a mother, I felt I had to read before I met with this man. Not easy. I'm telling you, it's not easy. I'm sorry, it's not. And when I said he had no thymus gland, he said, you don't need a thymus gland. I said, maybe at 14, but at 7. I said, John had frequent bloody noses. Little boys pick their nose and rupture the membrane, and that's why they get bloody noses. I'll tell you, by the time I got out of that meeting, it took me weeks, absolutely weeks, to get my equilibrium back again.
So we've talked about the challenges of that year and some of the challenges before and after and what you had to do moving forward. And lots of the people you mentioned committed suicide. A lot of people couldn't go on. And, a lot of that is related to mental health and the chemicals effect on the body and the brain and the mental health.
Absolutely.
But what do you think it was in you that allowed you to go on and to be resilient through all that?
No, I think if I could finish one other point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just wanted you to understand. I mean, how part of that, the government was, and they tried to force me to go back home. And following the hotel, we moved in with Grams for about 6 months, and then following that, after President Carter declared that emergency, then we were living in air-based housing. So consequently, for close to 2 years, we did not live in the house. During that 2 years, it was burglarized 6 times. I mean, they took a regulation-sized pool table out of the house. I had because I had a big kitchen, a huge oval table with swivel chairs and everything. And it looked like they took that and just turned the table upside down. And it was wintertime, the last robbery, and the creek was frozen, so they sort of dragged it across the snow. You could see the lines and had something waiting on the other side, take them away. But I mean, at this point, for us, material things meant nothing, Then the government, as I say, the government kept forcing because they didn't because since I had become very vocal and was not living in the house, they didn't like that because, you know, they were trying to persuade people that everything was safe. And they finally, they would tell the people to go back, and they said it's very safe to go back, but don't go in your basement. Don't eat any vegetables from your garden. And above all, do not have a baby, because you know what happens if you have a baby. But it was safe to live there, and that's what they were telling us. And I found that very, you know, I mean, you just couldn't understand. And you were just constantly battling this, the government and whatever. And the one thing is that we were persistent. We knew what we wanted. We wanted out of there. And we didn't accept anything that they gave us before that, you know. And finally, they figured out we would not go away. I mean, to this day, they try to say that they didn't have to move us. But, you know, they did have to move us. I mean, they did stupid things, like they said behind my old house, where the creek was, they took all the sediment and they piled it behind my house and left it there till they decided where to send it. They said they put a tarp underneath, but the rain, you had 32 parts per billion of you know, dioxin there. I mean, this is going to stream off, and it's still going to be there. And they have been reselling that house to people, you know, saying it's safe. And I've argued this point with the EPA, I mean, and done all of these things. But, I mean, to me, I'm old, and I will still continue with the word. And so I have talked to many grassroots over the years, grassroots groups. I have talked to many different groups around the country. I've been serving on environmental boards all these years, and indeed I have been recently. I'm focusing on students, because I'm 87, and I want this crusade to keep on and go forward. And so I've even talked to students as young as 10, and to high school students, university students, but it's very important. And in the last 2 years, because a book was written called Paradise Falls by Keith O'Brien that documents a lot of what I've been saying today. I have talked to at least 40 book clubs. Mm-hmm. And those, you know, telling them, and people, and from one to another, but the word gets around, and I'm fortunate that my message has been accepted. And as I say, my mantra, going back to that meeting in California, has been that no other child. I can't bring Uncle John back. I can't bring him. I can't bring John back, but I mean, it's very important to me. I mean, the silly, stupid city of Niagara Falls, and I say that, they put a playground within inches of the 20,000 tons of chemicals that are still buried there. And they refuse to put a sign that just says private property, not even warning people. So for the last 46 years, I've been all over the place. I mean, maybe this is kind of a funny part to a very sad part, but I have some friends in Japan, because I've worked with people from all over the world, and I knew I had been interviewed by a Japanese journalist. So I got a Christmas card from my friend in Japan, and he said, you know, I think I saw your name in the paper in Japanese script, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I told him, well, you probably did, I knew. And so then I get another Christmas card another year from him, and he says, well, I'm writing my Christmas card to you, and I'm listening to you talking on the BBC. Ah. So, I mean, it was sort of funny. But this man actually, he took Paradise Falls, the book Paradise Falls, and he translated it in Japanese so his family could read it. But I mean, it's sort of, so I've gotten to know people all over the world. I mean, it's kind of funny. I couldn't believe the EPA invited me to speak at one of their conferences, and I said, well, if you don't censor me, And they said, no, we're not going to censor you. So prior to the meeting, we used to have these conference calls because we were scattered all over the country. And so there was somebody from the EPA, there was someone from New York State Department of Health, myself, and a journalist. We were all on the panel. So we would have these conference calls, and I'd be talking, and the person from the EPA, he starts yelling at me. That's history, Luella. We don't have time for history. And I said, oh, we just keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again, and he just going on. And he said, we spent $250 million on remedial work. So I said, on Love Canal, so it's done right. I said, the monetary figure is not the criteria for all this. So we just kept arguing back and forth, and I happily went to that conference. And when I went to the conference, I said to him, he was there, and so I spoke, and I gave my whole usual tirade of something, and he got there, and he just read chronologically what they had done at Love Canal. I mean, this. So one of the things, this particular meeting, was for people that were hired by the EPA to go out and work with community people. So I explained to them, I tried to temper a little bit, I'm not good at that.
No.
and I said, sometimes we say something and we don't think about what the person that's receiving this message, how they're receiving it. And you have to really think about it, and that. And a lot of the people came up, they're hugging me afterwards and all that sort of stuff. So following the meeting, it was held in Buffalo. So they had a bus tour through Love Canal for the participants, and then the EPA people are all riding in this huge stretch limo behind the bus. And then I had taken a few people, because there wasn't enough room on the bus. I had taken a few people in my car, and I was riding along. And when I got back to the hotel in Buffalo, and I said, what did I tell you? I said, that stretch limo running around Love Canal was not a good image at all.
Right.
And this fellow that represents the EPA, he's the representative in that area, he said that's all I could hire. Which was baloney. But it's just they just never learned the lesson, and maybe if you just keep hammering away, as I do, hammering away and talking and constantly talking and being I've been interviewed many times. My name appears in a lot of books, and if you want, I can later give you, I don't have them here. Rich Newman has the book on the colonial history. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't.
Waiting to get slapped in the face there.
Yeah, be careful. Behave yourself. So anyway, but this is very important to me.
Yeah.
And I really cannot not do it. As you know, you saw earlier this afternoon, I'm working with people in East Palestine where that train overturned, and now there's a problem down in Connors, Georgia. And so they've asked me, although it's just at my age to kind of travel too far, but I finally agreed I would do a Zoom call on that day for the press conference. But I cannot, people keep saying, you should rest, you should take it easy. I can't do it. It's just very important to me. It's just right inside here. And John is not, he can't die for naught. He just, I have to save the other children. This is something I forgot to mention earlier. You had people that were extremely jealous of us being in hotels, or that we were getting whatever we were getting, because, and I used to this was my home while I lived in the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
I'd get up in the morning, I'd make the bed, and treat it like it was my own home. So then I get called into the state, and people reported me that I was wasting taxpayer money because I really wasn't using that room.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else saw a family eating a hot fudge sundae. We had $16 a day. I mean, every day I can tell you we paid out of pocket, because we had a special menu that had the taxes on it and the tips and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and but I mean, it was every day that we paid, more. They were supposed to prepare lunches for children, for the children to go to school, and Grandpa, he had to stop at 7-Eleven to buy sandwiches for them because they'd never have them ready. I mean, the amount of discomfort, and I guess this is out of context here, so I don't know if you want to
No, go ahead.
arrange it, but
No.
but I mean, it's just that you can't really believe just. I mean, but people don't like. I mean, to just a couple of years ago, somebody said to me, "Well, they shouldn't have moved all those people. They said they should have moved you." But I mean, so if I had chemicals in my backyard and next door had no chemicals, how long is it going to take for them to migrate? I mean, it's just. Well, my brother lives there, and he's fine. He moved back, and they said, "Oh, well, that's fine." I explained, but some people, just like cigarette smoking, they smoked. I mean, God bless them. They have some kind of an enzyme or something in their immune system that makes them immune to these things. But doesn't mean everyone is like that. And it's the same thing, with chemicals. And you have to be understanding. You just not make rash decisions. That everybody is out there and just.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but this is. I mean, I couldn't believe I said. All right, when I was called into the state, I said, if this is the way it is, I won't make the bed in the morning. Why do I have to make the bed in the morning? It's this.
Right.
So I mean, that's what went on. But I mean, strange. And then I remember there was. Well, I mean, there's always reporters galore all over the place, particularly on the anniversaries, and the one time I was taking somebody, I think it was Reuters Press, around, and the owner of my former home and his friend, they were out in front. So she said, "Oh, I'm going to go talk. Do you want to talk to him?" I said, "No, I've already talked to him once, and he has his opinion. He told me that it was a nice neighborhood, and he believed the government, and so forth and so on." And I said, "Well, we thought it was a nice government, a nice neighborhood. We had good neighbors. We had block parties too, but I said, I hope you don't have to find out how I did that the government isn't telling you the truth." And I left it at that. But I mean, so anyhow, and so the woman, they said to the woman, "This was Luella Kenny's house, and she's getting so rich on all of this." And the lawyer, the journalist said, she knew that I do all this stuff. I volunteer. I don't take money for this sort of stuff, and I volunteer. And she came back, and I mean, it just sort of made her see what kind of people they were,
Mm-hmm.
But it was just strange the way she thought I was getting so rich on everything. But that's the way it goes. I mean, what can I tell you? I mean, sometimes my life gets crazy. I mean, not so much now, but at that time, I mean, it was like New Year's Eve, and I have the NBC evening news in my house and things like that. I mean, it was crazy. New Year's morning at 6:00 in the morning, they'd come and pick me up to go down for another interview. But I mean, I don't particularly care for all those things, but they're important, and I realize they're important, and I do them just for that. But it's, if I can save children, that's all I care, and it's important that people realize, because there's so much negativeness about that, that it really doesn't exist and is not. But I want a planet. I want a land for my grandchildren, my great grandchildren. I'm at the end of my life now. I mean, there's no question that who knows, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to me that I see my future generations have a place like I grew up in.
Can you tell me then all of these difficulties that you faced? And it's not just, I mean, we're talking about this, and maybe in a later interview we could talk about some of the other difficulties later in your life, because this certainly wasn't the only one or the last one.
No, it wasn't the last one. I mean,
but can you tell me what, because a lot of people would have just given up at that point, or, you know, they wouldn't have any fight left in them, or they would have gone into a depression and not been able to come out of it. What do you think it is in you, or what got you through that, and what has kept you going? I mean, you're 87 years old and you're still, I don't know, I think you're a great grandma.
Yeah, I am a great grandma.
Yeah, you are a great grandma. But, you know, you're not, woe is me, this is all terrible, everything is horrible. What do you think keeps you moving forward and keeps you positive?
Well, I think the one thing that keeps me forward is you know, trying to save children.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the one thing that keeps me positive is that, you know, Grandpa and I sang in choirs all through the whole thing. And I think that maybe some of the anger, some of the frustration, you know, was released to keep me going. I think in general I am an optimistic person, and I've just kept going always, which I think is important. But because I've seen others, I mean, when their husbands die, I mean, they just fall apart, and they I don't want to live any longer, or I don't want to. I mean, I just always kept thinking, I have my family, number one. After John died, I said, you know, I had two other boys, and you have to focus on them, and it isn't fair to them, and you know, you put things aside and you just go forward. I think the singing was one thing that really helped enormously, because I mean, through the whole thing, when that weekend of the emergency, I mean, we went off to New York City, and we went to a Polish singers convention, and so I get into the hotel, and there's a stack of notes from news media. We know you're here, so we're keeping track of you in case something else happens. You know? And so then we had tickets to go to Radio City Music Hall. And so the rest of the family is in there watching it, and I'm on the phone because one of those notes was somebody wanted an interview, and I'm giving an interview on the phone. And that night everybody goes to the ball. I'm up in the hotel room doing another interview. So I mean, it really interfered in our lives, but we sort of did what we could do. I had all of this. I mean, I had many funny experiences, but this one, there was a state senator from Brooklyn, and they still haven't cleaned up that Gowanus Hotel, Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn, and he was having a press conference, and he invited three of us to come down to talk about it, you know. So we went, so we flew down, and I was sort of always the matriarch of the group because I was older, the others were younger, they were only in their 20s. If you can believe, I mean, at that young age, they were in their 20s, and they had, so we go down, and then they kept saying, he was a state senator, and they were all nervous, and they said, you're sitting in the front. They told me, so I'm sitting in the front, and they're sitting in the back, and we're going away, and it was right about 2 weeks before we went to the Polish Singers Convention. And so when we're there talking, and so this senator says to me, and I thought he had a Polish name, but I was not sure. And anyway, he said to him, he said, you know, if you ever come down for anything, I'll get tickets for you for anything. I said, you know, as a matter of fact, my whole family's coming down for the Polish Singers Alliance. It would be nice to have Yankees tickets for my sons. Yes, he did get Yankees tickets for us in Steinbrenner's box.
Wow.
And so anyway, he says, oh, I'm going to that. And I said, oh. So we start talking, and I know his secretary's parents. I know.
You know somebody everywhere. Everywhere.
It's just ridiculous. But anyway, so then he came, and I think he was going to be on 60 Minutes on that Sunday night at the banquet. And he came to our room, and the boys were there anyway, and we were going to the banquet. So he was watching 60 Minutes, and we're all upstairs. Wonder where Senator Bartashevitz is. I didn't say where he was. I didn't open my mouth. But anyway, he was up there, and then he came down. But he came and picked us up, and he was getting very upset. If a lot of times he found out I was coming into New York City, and he didn't want me being in New York City by myself. He said, you have to stay at my house. You know, the one time, I mean, they put us up in this elaborate hotel overlooking Central Park, and I was with another one of my neighbors, and so I called him to tell him, watch the program tomorrow. He says, why aren't you staying at my house? You know, he's very upset. I said, your wife is expecting a baby any minute now, and I don't think she needs me there. And I hear her shouting, I wish you were here instead of him. He came back from Albany early for this. But anyway, we became great friends over the years. I did stay a couple of times. I had been asked different places, and I stayed at his they had one of the brownstones in Brooklyn. It was very nice, and but it's funny. I mean, we had all of these. I could go on. I mean, but I think that's one of the funniest stories.
So we've talked about some of the challenges in your life and some of the bad days and some of the stories, but what, if you had to pick a day, what do you think the best day of your life was so far? In 87 years, the best day?
June 6, 1964.
Yeah? And tell me about June 6th, 1964.
That's the day I got married.
Yeah?
Yeah. You didn't know that?
I did know that, but they don't know that. You want to share a little bit about your wedding and what made the day so special?
I was marrying your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it was special. It was not a big, well, it was a big wedding in the sense that 500 people came to the wedding. And
it wasn't a big wedding. It was only 500 people.
But it was amazing because some of the children of friends of my parents, they went out and bought dresses, and then they weren't invited to the wedding. I mean, how could you invite all these people to the wedding? But anyhow, we had the church was in the morning, and we had a beautiful ceremony, and it was funny because I had belonged, I had gone to school in the school that was attached to this church from the time I was in kindergarten and ninth grade, and then and I had done a lot of work in the parish, and so when I was getting married, the pastor came, well, he's about, who do you want to marry, and I because one of the assistants wanted to marry us, and then one of the others, and he wanted to marry us. And I'm not getting into that, so you make your decisions with the pastor. I mean, actually, he died 2 months after the wedding then. So he stood there on the altar the whole time, and Monsignor Miko, well, he was not a Monsignor at the time, but he married us. And so it was, I thought it was, a nice wedding, a nice ceremony, and then we went to my parents' house, and she prepared a big breakfast for the people that were there, and we had this breakfast and went for photos, in the Rose Garden at Hyde Park in Niagara Falls. And I mean, interestingly enough, that's where the picture is, that you duplicated the picture, and then Kelsey duplicated the picture of, you know, the groom standing against the tree and holding his hand out, and that. So we have this whole thing down, and so then we had the reception at this restaurant in Niagara Falls. It was the Como restaurant. It was an Italian restaurant, and it just closed now. I guess it ran out of family to keep running it, but it had been going for 100 years, and now it finished at 100 years. And because there were so many people, we rented both halls. They had a hall, the lower hall and an upper hall, and so we had food served in the lower hall, and then because it was an Italian restaurant, Grandpa had to have his 2 cents, so we had a Polish band. And so we danced a lot of polkas and danced and people kept saying it was a very nice wedding. They enjoyed it, and I know I didn't need a thing that day.
No?
No, but I mean everything went well. I mean, there was some rain. There was some rain, but that was neither here nor there at that point.
As promised, we're going to show you how to make Nonni's French onion soup. And we're starting by cutting onions. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. And I heard of this trick. I don't know if it is correct or not. I saw it somewhere on the internet that if you put a damp towel or paper towel somewhere near where you're cutting onions, the oils are attracted to the fluid, and that's why it goes into your eyes, and it will make you not cry. I don't have any confidence that this is going to work, but we're going to try it.
Just be careful. We're not slicing me.
Now, we have 8 people coming for dinner, and I would like enough leftovers for maybe 10 people. I know we make enough for an army every time. How many onions should I be cutting up?
I never put less than 12 onions. I
Okay.
don't know how many are there.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have 12 exactly. How funny
oh my
is that?
goodness, and I didn't count them.
I know. This one is kind of like a little mama and baby. But I do have another bag of onions down there if we want more. And how much butter should go in there? We're going to saute and caramelize all these.
I would put, for that amount, maybe 1.5 sticks of butter.
Okay. And do you like it salted, unsalted? Does it matter for your recipe?
I think salted in this case. We won't add any other salt.
Okay. And how thin do we like these cut? Okay. You show us. Hold on. Wait. We'll give you guys a little close-up.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, show us how close you like to do it. Okay. So kind of, I'm going to get my hands right near that knife.
I'm getting even with you.
Yeah, pretty thin. Or what do you think?
Well, I think we need a couple more onions. I mean, I like a lot of onions in this soup, and I'm looking at it.
There's not enough onions in there yet?
That's right.
Okay.
I think 2 more should do it.
2 more? So we're going to go with 14, and then you think an extra half stick of butter so far?
Right.
Okay, so now we have 14 onions in the pot and 2 sticks of butter. All right.
I mean, sometimes it's just, use your judgment how much. But you said you wanted a lot of soup. You wanted to be able
I want a lot of leftovers. I'm going to send a bunch to neighbors, and, you'll take some home. Tori will take some home.
If I get home.
If you get home. There is due to be a giant winter storm occurring the day after Thanksgiving.
I think you planned it.
I did plan it, so you have to stay here.
That's what I figured. I do it.
I control the weather.
Yes, I know.
We have our onions in this pot. We have 2 sticks of butter in there. We should probably get that a little closer down. And we just have it on, I have it on 1, and I have a gas stove. I might turn it up or down depending, but we're just gonna slow caramelize these for the next several hours until they get nice and brown. You can see we have cooked down significantly. Earlier I think it was like up to here with the onions.
What?
And it's cooked all the way down. It hasn't quite yet caramelized. If I didn't say, it's been about 2.5 hours, and we still have a long, long way to go. And if you were wondering, the trick with the wet paper towel did not work out. I was sobbing over there, crying, cutting up all those onions. So we still have a few more hours to go here to get the nice caramelized color on this. Brown enough, or do you want it a little longer?
Just a smidgen longer.
Okay. So
I mean, we'll make it evenly divided and that sort of thing.
right. We are, I don't know how long this has been cooking down. We separated it into 2 separate pots because it really wasn't caramelizing fast enough. So we have 2 pots here, and I have recombined them. We're gonna go just a little bit longer, but it's been about, I think, 4.5 hours now, 4.5 to 5. So we'll go just a little longer, get a little more caramelization. And Nonni, if we weren't to be cooking these down this much and getting it this dark, so we're doing this more, a lot for the flavor, but for the color. But what would I do if I didn't have time to do all this and I still wanted that dark brown color?
Then you would add gravy master to it.
Okay, and which is what?
It's a
Like a colorant?
It's a color, and it makes
Yeah.
it gives a color to it.
Okay.
And I mean, you can't say a certain amount. I would just look at the color
Yeah.
and decide that's the color you like.
Okay. I can't believe though how much this is cooked down.
I know. I think we have to make a note that for whatever amount we want for next year, maybe have 30 onions.
Yeah, I would agree, because we have what, 14 in here now. I would say 30 would not be that bad. We were just talking about it. I said I could easily, with the amount of onions in here, if I wanted to, I could eat 10 onions in a day if this was cooked down like this. I would just take a whole bowl full of this and eat it as
Well,
a meal.
I'll tell you, the aroma is killing me because I'm ready to dig in.
Oh, this is the best smell in the world. Butters and onion.
Okay.
It's almost bedtime, I think.
It is. I think so.
Oh. All right, we'll be back with you in just a second. You think the color's pretty perfect here?
I think so, don't you?
I think so. All right, let's show them what the color looks like. All right, you guys can see that. I don't know if it's translating on your television, but it is pretty dark and beautiful. So now we're gonna...
I mean, you don't want to burn it.
No. We're gonna start adding our broth. And we're using chicken bone broth. You can use beef broth. We like chicken better though,
Yes.
or you like chicken better. I just like to eat the soup. It doesn't matter what you put in it, I like to eat it. We're just gonna deglaze our pan a little bit too.
You know, I think you may like the story that when I was telling Tori earlier that my mother, when I said I was having French onion soup, she brought her own soup because she didn't trust me. And when she tasted it, she begged me to make it all the time.
Well, it's delicious. And how many of these broths do you think we should put in the soup?
I want to say at least 3, and then I want to make a decision looking at it.
Okay.
A lot of this is eyeballing things.
We have 3 cartons, I suppose, of bone broth. And I will also add or note, we did use bone broth. So if you're using just regular chicken broth, it might be a little more clear. The bone broth is a little more colorful, opaque, a little more opaque than what regular chicken broth is. But what do you think about the consistency of this? Do you want one more, or do you like it where it's at?
I like it where it's at. I mean, it's up to you.
I do too.
I mean, the other thing we could do is get some more onions.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say it. You want me to caramelize? I can caramelize some more onions in the morning.
Well, that's what I'm just saying.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
And then we put another one in.
Okay. Ladies and gents, add to this recipe that you can go ahead, if you feel it's not oniony enough, you can go ahead and chop up another dozen onions in the morning and add it to the soup, which is what we will be doing. But in the meantime, would we like to put the rest of this together?
Yes, we could put the rest of it together. We could
Okay.
put the another container of the broth in there, and another.
Oh, you want more broth. That's why you want to add more onions. Because you want to add more broth.
Yeah.
Okay. My apologies. I thought you just wanted more onions in this soup.
Well,
Without more broth.
but I thought that. I mean, you wanted a lot. That's why I thought you wanted enough to be able to give it away.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, we have
Okay.
8 people tomorrow.
Yes. And what else goes in the soup, though?
The wine and
Okay.
a
So
little seasoning.
Yeah, you want a little, you like a dry white, right?
I like a dry white. Yeah.
Okay. But we have used red in the past when we haven't had the white.
I mean,
It's up to you. This recipe is really customizable. It's not fussy.
it's not fussy. It tastes good.
It tastes delicious.
Oh.
Tell me when for the wine.
Stop. Yeah.
Okay. Woo! That was a little aggressive.
You almost had a little.
I can't tell you how much I poured in there. I just poured it until it went. Maybe a couple glugs. I don't know.
I know that's what I always do.
Until it tastes right. I'm gonna do the taste test.
Oh, me?
Yeah, of course you. How is it?
Definitely needs salt and pepper.
Okay, we need to add more salt and pepper.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we haven't added any yet. You want the rest of that? Take it. We have added salt and pepper, and then Nonni tasted it again, and we added some more salt and pepper, and now we're adding a few bay leaves in there, and this is gonna simmer for a while now. How long do you want to simmer this overnight?
No,
No? How long would you like to simmer it for?
I would just turn it off now. We'll simmer it in the morning.
Okay, so we're gonna turn it off now, let it cool. We'll chill it and then re-simmer it in the morning because it is 10:30 at night now.
Here we are again.
So we decided not to add any more onions because there are plenty, it looks like, in here. So tell us, what do you serve in with the soup? We're just gonna taste a little bit. It's Thanksgiving today, so we start our meal with the French onion soup, but we're just taking a little taste to give you guys an idea of it.
Croutons.
I can't have croutons.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
No, that's okay. And tell everyone about what you do for the croutons.
The croutons, I just take regular white bread. I suppose you could take any bread, but I always use white bread.
Do you use white or Italian?
Italian is good. I use Italian. And then, particularly, you know what I like are the baguettes, or the French baguettes, because they're a little bit, have more body to them.
And that's what this is, the baguette.
Oh, good choice. And then you cut it in cubes and toast it in the oven a little bit. You can put a little bit of garlic flavoring or something on it, or just plain. And then they add something to your soup.
Now, you were telling me earlier the way you serve this if it's just a few people. How do you serve it if it's just a few?
If it's just a few people, I have a large, to fit the top of the bowl, slice of bread that I've toasted, and a lot of mozzarella cheese, and then I pop it in the oven just before serving, and it melts, and then serve it like that.
Okay. And now I have Parmesan. Should we have had some mozzarella?
No, I usually, when I serve it like this, I usually have Parmesan.
Okay.
This is sort of my days of thinking when we were when Grandpa and I would go to Italy, and you know, we were singing in a choir, and then after each concert, we'd come out and there'd be something to eat. But Parmesan Reggiano was stacked up like this.
Yeah?
And oh, yes. I mean, it's such a dream. Pardon me, I had to recall that memory.
Did you take a bunch from the stack and eat it?
Yeah, naturally.
All right. I'll do just a little bit. Oh, it smells heavenly.
This whole house smells heavenly right now. Let me tell you.
How do we do this here?
Perfect.
Excellent.
Perfect. You know, this is so nice for me to see my grandchildren carrying on the tradition. I mean, it was important to me. It was important to my husband too, who always traditions were very important to him, particularly at the holiday times. And really does my heart good to see that. That I know that the grandchildren are carrying it on, and it will go forth.
Yeah. Now, in closing, if you could give one piece of advice to the world, what would your advice be?
I think my advice would be is to be nice to everyone, be good to everyone. I mean, maybe everyone is different. Everyone has different customs, and embrace them and learn about them, and don't try to change people, because I think one of the greatest treasures I ever had was working in a place where I met people from all over the world. I learned their customs, and I learned the way they do things, and what's important to them, and they appreciated what was important to me. They embraced whatever customs I had, and I think that there would be more peace in the world.
I agree. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you so much for giving this interview.
Thank you. I mean, and I enjoyed it. And again, thank you so much for carrying on the traditions of being such a great granddaughter.
Oh, thank you for teaching them to me. I love you.
Love you.
All right. See you guys next time.
Bye.